Yes, humanity. The species that invented language, fire, agriculture, and the wheel. The species that looked at the stars and asked deep philosophical questions about existence and meaning and our place in the cosmos. The species that also looked at Dave, who stole a fish from the communal pile in 28,000 BCE, and said, "We need to make this interesting." Because here's the thing nobody tells you about ancient humans. They had a lot of time. No phones, no streaming, no questionable reality television. Just long winters, limited food, and a growing list of people who had done something the tribe did not appreciate. And an absolutely relentless willpower to make those people regret it. So today, we are going through the worst punishments ancient humans ever invented. Stone Age, Ice Age, Bronze Age, all the ages where the punishment was creative, terrible, and somehow always escalating. Let's begin, and I apologize in advance. Actually, no I don't. You clicked on this. Before we had civilizations, we had tribes. Before we had courts, we had elders. And before we had prisons, we had the outdoors, which in the Paleolithic was significantly more dangerous than any prison ever built. Number 1. Exile. This was the original punishment, the foundational option, the one that required zero infrastructure and delivered maximum consequences. You did something the tribe decided was unacceptable, stole food, attacked a troop member, violated whatever rules kept 40 people from killing each other in a cave, and the tribe simply stopped including you. No fire, no food sharing, no warning when the bears came through at night. You were just gone from everything that kept you alive. Now I know what you are thinking. That sounds almost polite compared to what comes later, and you would be right, except for the part where being alone in the Paleolithic meant you were surrounded by megafauna that outweighed you by a factor of 10 and had absolutely no reason to leave you alone. Exile was not banishment. It was a nature-sponsored execution with extra steps. Efficient, organic, zero budget. The tribe did not even have to watch. Number 2. Exposure. A close cousin of exile, but with a specific address. Some Stone Age communities, documented across archaeological evidence and contemporary hunter-gatherer studies, use controlled exposure as punishment for serious violations. You were left in a designated location in winter, without your furs. And yes, I am aware that sounds like the setup to a complaint rather than an execution, but the Ice Age would like a word about what minus 40 degrees Celsius does to a person without insulation. The answer is everything. Quickly. The genius of exposure as punishment was that it was technically reversible. The tribe could come back and retrieve you after a period. Whether they chose to was a separate question, one that depended entirely on how badly you had misbehaved and whether anyone had put in a good word for you. Note to self, before committing a tribal offense, cultivate good relationships with at least 3 people who will vouch for you. This is timeless advice. Number 3. The megafauna option. This one requires a moment of appreciation for the creativity involved. Some early human communities, and we are talking evidence inferred from ritual sites and bone arrangements that suggest deliberate staging, appear to have used large predators as the final act of certain punishments. Not by throwing someone directly at an animal, that would lack ceremony, but by leaving the condemned individual in known predator territory, bound, unable to run, able to hear whatever was in the dark for however long it took. Woolly rhinos, cave bears, spotted hyenas the size of modern lions. The Pleistocene was not short of candidates for this role. It was, technically, a death sentence administered by nature. The community did not do it. The ecosystem did it. The community just arranged the venue. You have to respect the deniability. Subscribe before Act 2. Act 2 is where early civilizations got hold of the concept of punishment and said, what if we wrote it down, gave it a name, and made it significantly worse? The Bronze Age brought writing, mathematics, architecture, the first cities, trade routes spanning continents, and the very enthusiastic approach to codifying exactly what happened to people who broke the rules. Because nothing says advanced civilization like a detailed written list of who gets what done to them and why. Number 4. The Code of Hammurabi's Worst Hits. Hammurabi was the king of Babylon around 1754 BCE. He created one of the earliest comprehensive legal codes in human history, 282 laws, carved into an 8-foot stone pillar for everyone to see. No ignorance of the law as a defense when the law is literally a giant rock in the city center. Now, you probably know the famous one, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. What you probably do not know is that Hammurabi's code also included, if a builder constructs a house that collapses and kills the owner, the builder shall be put to death. And if the collapse kills the owner's son, the builder's son shall be put to death. The builder's son, who built nothing, who was presumably at home having a perfectly normal day. What I'm saying is that ancient Babylonian construction liability law was extremely motivating. I guarantee there were no shoddy contractors in Babylon, or if there were, their children were having serious conversations with them about quality control. Number 5. The River Ordeal. This is one of the most documented punishments from ancient Mesopotamia, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You were accused of something, a crime, a transgression, an allegation that someone in the community had made against you. And rather than investigate, gather evidence, or hear testimony, the legal process was as follows. You jumped into the Euphrates River. If you survived, you were innocent. The river had decided. If you drowned, you were guilty. The river had also decided and also handled sentencing. This is documented in Hammurabi's code itself, Law Number 2, written down official policy. The river as judge, jury, and in the majority of cases, executioner. I want to point out that the Euphrates in flood season runs at approximately 2 meters per second, with a considerable undertow. The acquittal rate of the River Ordeal was not high, but it was, technically, impartial, which was apparently the important thing. Number 6. The sack punishment. Ancient Egyptian legal texts and Near Eastern records from the Bronze Age documented a punishment colloquially known as the sack. The condemned individual was sewn inside an animal skin, usually fresh, still warm, sealed completely, and then left in the sun. I am going to let you do the arithmetic on what happens to a fresh animal skin in the Egyptian sun over several hours. The shrinkage alone was considered part of the punishment. It was described in records as both a method of confinement and, if left long enough, a method of execution, which tells you that ancient Egyptians had a very flexible definition of the phrase left long enough. Number 7. Crushing. The Bronze Age's favorite structural application. Multiple Bronze Age civilizations documented crushing as a method of execution for specific categories of crime. The Hittites, who built an empire across modern Turkey around 1600 BCE, had formal records of criminals being crushed beneath large stones for offenses against the state and against the gods. The administration of this punishment was specific, not dropped from a height, placed, and then weight added, progressively, slowly, in a manner that required the condemned to be present and aware for a considerable portion of the process. The Hittites called this an offering, which is a word I will never use in the same way again. Every ancient civilization eventually reached the point where the standard options felt insufficient, where the crime was so egregious, the offender so comprehensively on the wrong side of the community that the usual methods seemed almost casual. So they innovated. And this is where things get genuinely creative in a way that I want to stress is horrifying and yet somehow also impressive as engineering. Number 8. The kiln. Early Bronze Age Anatolia. Pottery kilns were among the most important pieces of technology in the early Bronze Age. They fired clay into ceramic. They produced the vessels that stored grain, water, wine. They also, according to records from early Anatolian city-states, occasionally served a secondary function. The condemned individual was placed inside an unlit kiln. The door was sealed, and then the kiln was used as intended. The records frame this as a ritual purification. The fire cleanses, the transgression is burned away. I want to note that framing a kiln execution as a spiritual spa treatment is the most ambitious rebrand in the history of punishment. Number 9. Staking to the ground. Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East. This punishment is documented across multiple Bronze Age cultures with a consistency that suggests it was independently invented several times, because the logic is depressingly straightforward. The condemned was staked flat on their back on the ground, wrists, ankles, immovable, in an area with known ant activity, or near a body of water with insects, and left. Not killed, left. The ancient Near Eastern records that describe this are extremely calm about it. Administrative language, procedural tone, the same register used to describe tax collection or grain distribution. Person staked, location noted, case closed. The bureaucracy of suffering, delivered with the emotional investment of a filing clerk on a Tuesday afternoon. Number 10. The Sacred River Crocodile, Ancient Egypt, a punishment in 2 parts. This one requires you to understand something about ancient Egyptian religious belief. The Nile was sacred. The crocodile was the manifestation of Sobek, the crocodile god, associated with power, protection, and the pharaoh's authority. So, when certain condemned individuals in ancient Egypt were thrown into the Nile, specifically in areas known for crocodile activity, this was not classified as an execution. It was classified as a divine judgment. If the crocodiles took you, the gods had decided. If somehow you survived, you were considered touched by divine mercy, and your sentence was commuted. The Crocodile Ordeal, the Nile's answer to the Euphrates River Ordeal. Ancient justice systems really committed to the bit of letting nature adjudicate. Number 11. Bog Sacrifice. Northern Europe, Late Bronze Age, and Iron Age. The bog bodies of Northern Europe are some of the most extraordinary and unsettling archaeological discoveries ever made. Hundreds of them, preserved in peat bogs across Denmark, Germany, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. The chemistry of peat bogs, highly acidic, oxygen-free, cold, creates conditions that preserve soft tissue across thousands of years. Skin, hair, internal organs, the expression on the face. And on almost every bog body found, the same pattern appears. Multiple methods of death applied simultaneously. Strangulation and throat cutting, and blunt force trauma, often in combination. Toland man, found in Denmark in 1950 and dated to around 400 BCE, was hanged. The rope was still around his neck. His face was so well preserved that the first responders thought they had found a recent murder victim. Lindau man, found in England in 1984 and dated to around 300 BCE, had his throat cut, had himself strangled, and was struck on the head, all 3. The redundancy of this approach suggests one of 2 things. Either the people administering these deaths were extremely thorough, or they genuinely were not sure which method was doing the work and decided to run all 3 simultaneously just to be safe, which is in its own way the most ancient human thing on this entire list. When in doubt, do everything. So, what does any of this tell us? You, dear viewer, have just sat through ancient exile, Ice Age exposure, Babylonian river trials, kiln executions, sacred crocodile judgments, and bog bodies with 3 simultaneous causes of death. And here is what all of it has in common. None of it was random. Every single punishment on this list was deliberate, communal, and designed to communicate something to everyone who witnessed or heard about it. Not just to the person being punished, to everyone else. The stake in the ground was not just for the person staked. It was a message written in a language older than any alphabet. Do not do what this person did, because this is what this person is experiencing, and you can see it, and you will remember it. Ancient humans did not have newspapers, did not have broadcasts, did not have the infrastructure to disseminate information across a community quickly. What they had was public space and the willingness to use it. What they had was the understanding that fear, administered visibly and memorably, travels faster and further than any written law. The methods changed across 50,000 years. The operating principle never did. Make it visible, make it memorable. Make sure Dave never does it again.
Dave always knows what he did.